Welcome to another Founder Wisdom podcast with Kylie Mowbray Allen. She is live from Australia near Byron Bay. Beautiful spot for surfing, for diving, and doing a bunch of sports. She is founder at Hello Media, and she's a digital marketing coach, speaker, creator, entrepreneur. We're going to talk about these things today. And this podcast is brought to you by podfire.com. If you want to start scale, be invited to podcasts like this one. This is your shot. This is my podcasting agency. If you want to start learning 10x with your own podcast, I interview 15 CEOs a day, and my brain is growing by the second. If you want to grow your network, if you want to generate leads and even sales, you can start your pod. Hit me up at podfire.com. Kylie, welcome to the pod. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Nice to be here with you. So, yeah, as you said, I'm Kylie. I'm from Hello Media, and I'm actually originally from New Zealand, but I left there in my early 20s, went off to the UK for a while, and then I've been in Australia for a couple of decades. So I have a bit of a mixed up accent, but yeah, it's great to be here. We're in spring at the moment, so it's a beautiful time of year to be in Byron Bay.
Yes, it is. And you have an interesting career. So, FM television, police TV, ACP magazines. Tell us about that early career of yours and the moment you decided to start your business in 2015.
Right. So actually, it even goes before that because I grew up in a film family. My father was a film producer, and my mum was the first ever lead actress in New Zealand's first ever colour feature film. So that was just very much in my blood. And so even just being a business owner was in my blood. I never saw my parents work for someone else, for example. So my first job out of uni was heading off to the UK to work for FM television. And my boss took me out for lunch on the first day and said, well, in a few days, we're leaving for Sardinia. We'll be back for a couple of days. Then we'll be off to, I think it was off to Hungary. We'll be back for a few more days. Then we'll be back to Milan. And I was like, whoa, like just a young girl from New Zealand, the other end of the world. That was pretty extraordinary. So that first year, I was in 22 countries. The second year in 18 countries. So I was incredibly lucky there in my early 20s to be working for this incredible film company, traveling all over the world. And so when I went to Australia, I did a little bit in film and TV, and then I decided I was just ready for a bit of a change. So that's when I moved into magazines. And when I was based in the UK, I was already writing for a lot of magazines over there. So I thought I'll just continue on that path, which was really fun. Then I decided that I would start my own film company, which happened right off the bat of my father passing away. Actually, he died unexpectedly when he was 48, and I really ummed and ahed, do I go back to New Zealand and take over his company? And I knew I was so not ready for that. I wasn't primed for that. That just needed to be sold and dealt with, and I needed to start my own thing. And I was living in Sydney at the time. So after a little while, we moved up to the North Coast where I am now, took the company with us. And that was a shocker because I quickly realized things are really hard up here. Back then, you could get an ad made for your company for $100 with the local networks. So for me to be trying to charge 10 grand was going to be pretty hard. So I had to diversify. So I studied graphic design and I studied all other kinds of things so I could be a bigger agency, well, offering more. So that's really where it all began. And yeah, so I've had a few different businesses along the way. And so Hello Media is pretty much two different parts to it. So one part of it is the coaching side of the business. The other side of it is the digital marketing agency. And here we are in 2023.
All right, that's a cool story. Your camera, when you talk, you're kind of hitting the desk or something. It
Oh,
makes
let me
some
step
noise.
back. Thanks.
There's like some drums because you told me it was raining hard when we started. I was like, is that like rolling thunder or something? But then I realized the camera was moving. So interesting story of yours. And the police TV thing, like what was that exactly? It caught my attention.
Yeah, that was pretty weird. So I was based in Sydney working for the communications department of the New South Wales Police Force. they set up this brand new thing called police TV. So every morning it would go live at 8 a.m. out to all the LACs, they called them, so local area commands all over New South Wales. And it would show things like a segment called Be on the Lookout. It would have the latest criminal, show their mugshot and all that. But then there'd also be police acting out scenarios showing how to do a search on people and stuff like that. It was pretty wild for me. It was definitely not an area I'd ever been in before and knew anything about. So that was pretty fun for a while.
I am looking at your LinkedIn here, and you made a post about everything changing in the blink of an eye. And I think your husband is quadriplegic, and you're taking care of him on a daily basis. So very noble of yours. And yeah, tell us that story. That's quite striking.
So 16 years ago, my husband was playing rugby for Bangalore, our little village, against Byron Bay, and he broke his neck. So he was airlifted up to Queensland, which is about 2 hours away to Brisbane. He was in hospital there for about a year. Our daughter was 4 at the time, and then it was a. I mean, you can imagine going from being he's 6'3" rugby player, big fit guy, to suddenly being paralyzed from the neck down. And I have to say, it has been an incredible journey in all kinds of ways. But certainly, there's some extraordinary positives that come out of it. And I have to say, he's one of the most inspirational humans that you could meet. He's an incredibly inspiring guy. I don't think he'd like to be told he's inspiring, but he really is pretty incredible. He doesn't complain. He just gets on with it. He's very heavily involved in volunteering, and he runs a company with, he's a landscaper and horticulturalist, so he's, directing people what to do. He makes some incredible things, but mostly it's his generous volunteering spirit that just blows people away. Wow. So yeah, but I have to say though, we're very, very lucky in Australia, is that he has a package from the government, so he has carers. So while I'm also a carer, and so is our daughter, I don't do any of the daily tasks that involve the showering and the toileting and all that kind of stuff. So we're very lucky.
These freak accidents, I saw the documentary. I forgot what it was called, but it was this guy getting hit in American football, and it also ruptured an important spine in there. And yeah, he became quadriplegic. He has hopes to recover, but his whole life changed. And I'm wondering to myself, as a guy that loves mixed martial arts, could that happen with me? Not really, because, well, I mean, there could also always be some freak accidents, but it's just the dynamics of the sport. When you have a human running at 25, 30 kilometers an hour and hitting you in weird angles that you don't expect, this kind of injury can happen. And yeah, it's like the risk, you can't control that. I mean, even in football, European football could happen, but how did it happen precisely? What was the impact that caused that?
Actually, weirdly enough, it was just a really above board tackle. There was nothing wrong with the way the guy did it, and he just went down on the ground. My husband did. One of our friends came running over to him and pulled the guy off him. And my husband looked him in the eyes and said, are my legs in the air? And the friend said, nah, they're not. And he went, well, then and he knew from that second. So he never got knocked out. He never got a bruise, nothing. He was just, from that moment, paralyzed from the neck down. But the interesting thing is there's 40 people in the spinal unit at any one time. And the average stay is around 12 months. So you're getting to know them all really well, but pretty much I'd say out of the 40, 35 of them were guys. And Richard, my husband, was 31 at the time. And he was one of the oldest ones in there. So they're mostly all early 20s. And it's things like motocross, motorbikes to a certain extent. There was another rugby, there's a rugby league. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on there. But generally speaking, it's extreme sports with these young guys.
Right. Then he runs his business because I'm, first I have a good relationship with pain, and I prepare myself for every scenario, getting in jail, being quadriplegic and so forth. And I think it's not, I think I would 100% still run my business. So my business is with NS. So how does that work? Has some kind of typing computer, he can handle stuff with his mouth? How does the day-to-day as a quadriplegic entrepreneur works?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So over time, he found that he had one wrist that works. So if you even just hold up your hand like this, and if you put your hand forward, it automatically flops. But as soon as you push your hand back or fling it back, it moves into this position it's called a tenodesis grip. So his hands don't work, his fingers don't work, but this one wrist does. So he's able to drive a wheelchair using the joystick on it for the electric wheelchair with that wrist part there. And also it means that he can then turn and he can use a knuckle to type. So he won't use things like there's Dragon Speak and all kinds of software, and he won't use it because he says, as long as I can still do stuff, then I'm still going to do it. And so because he can use a knuckle, off he goes. So it's pretty extraordinary. And he just has a team of guys that he runs. He's teaching them to do everything. He does incredible rock work and incredible paving and all kinds of stuff. But he's very, very passionate about getting like giant concrete blocks that are just going to be landfill out from the tip and getting them cut up to be amazing stuff. So yeah, he just does some extraordinary, incredible jobs.
Do you think, since he has more time to think, that he's way more strategic about details and can get as much as accomplished as before from being so cerebral now?
I think that he is incredibly laser focused. So you're quite right about that. He's also always had very much like a calculator brain. So that's quite extraordinary. He just goes tick, 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 tick in his brain. But also he has a lot of time where he's unwell. It might be a pressure area on his foot or whatever. So not even unwell. I'm not talking like fluey or anything, but where he's got to stay in bed. And so he'll just research and watch stuff and you can still run everything from there. So that's good.
And how is that for you? Like, what type of time or energy do you have to invest to help him out with this?
It depends. If things are all good, then I'm just running my business and he's just running his. When things are not, then life can be extremely challenging. So I'll give you an example. He got COVID about a year ago now, and it was a complete disaster because the hospital could not take care of him. They didn't want to deal with his quadriplegic needs, which are high. They could only deal with his COVID needs. So my daughter and I were basically just being there around the clock doing 8-hour shifts each. She's at uni. I'm trying to run a business. So my shift might have been 10 at night till 6 in the morning. And then I've got to come into a full day of work with clients and stuff that's scheduled. And that went on for a long time because then they eventually sent him home for hospital at home, but then they never showed. There was not a single nurse nor doctor that ever turned up. So that can be pretty challenging. And since then, he's had a lot of other medical stuff going on. So yeah, it has been really tough at times. But on the whole, when things are good, we just tickety-boo along.
There you go. And extreme is the word, like sometimes people, they're like, hey, Charles, you do Ironmans and ultra runs, but I'm like, there's people like Kylie there that did 24 hours days running left and right, running a business. And that is way more than an Ironman, especially when you're dealing with that much stress. Like COVID is serious stuff, like it killed some people that I know personally. So yeah, that must have been quite stressful. But that's also why I do these ultra events. It's to prepare me for like these types of events that happen in life every now and then. And yeah, kudos to him and to you for going through that together. That's the true definition of the sacred union and being there for one another. It's really, really inspiring. Tell me about your business, because while listening to you, I was like, yeah, there would be no way she could deal with that if she didn't have her business. And same for your husband, right? And that right there is the why behind entrepreneurship, is the freedoms that you can choose your time and you can dance with pain and, discomfort in this life that will happen sooner or later, whether it's your kid, whether it is a close family member dying or being afflicted by a terrible disease or quadriplegism, I believe is the word. So tell me about that business of yours and how have you engineered it in a systematic way so that you can have full control of your time?
Such a good question. So I actually started off after his accident, after we came back from being up in Queensland, and it was a good couple of years in the end before we came home. And we had this incredible, we've got this incredible community who all did a lot of fundraising to go towards building us a purpose-built house for him. So, but that said, there's still a mortgage, there's still bills, there's still all the things that have got to be covered. So I quickly realized I couldn't do what we were told, well, basically that no quadriplegic wives could work. And I was like, well, that's not going to be the situation for us because I love working. I'm very passionate about what I do and stuff. I just had to find a different way of doing it. So I was doing this e-commerce business and designing kids' toys and decor and manufacturing it all fair trade. And it was in shops all over Australia. I had a distributor in Korea and a warehouse up in Brisbane. But it was perfect because I ran it all out of my garage. And I had employees come in each day and do their thing. But I was also there for my husband if he needed me. And then I was also doing Hello Media on the side. And that was the one I really wanted to focus on, because then really I can be anywhere. I could literally be working from hospital and not have to think about getting products in and out and, all that kind of stuff. So I sold that business, Rainbows and Clover. I sold it, it might be 5 years ago now, and could focus on Hello Media full time, which was really cool. Then though, when the pandemic happened, I was able to flip it around. So instead of doing around 60% of my sessions were in person, which is very time consuming because I'm either driving there or they're driving to me and you're having a cup of tea and there's all that little chat. So you can't fit that many clients in a day. So of course, the pandemic, I took everything online, and then people started getting used to being online and happy to being online. And then they were pumped to do workshops and stuff like that. So my business just boomed. And now I'm 100% online. And it's unlikely I would go back to any in-person sessions, although I still do speaking gigs. And, if I'm invited to teach workshops and stuff in person, I will. But for my business with my clients, I'm doing it all online.
I think if I would become paraplegic, one of my first reflex was also to search for a community for other folks that have been affected by it, and in your case, wives of paraplegic men or partners. Have you checked that for insights, for accountability? I mean, I have my own masterminds. It's called Level 96, and I really much believe in not only the cerebral part, but also the heart support part, in which, this gets really fucking hard and you need to talk to people sometimes. So have you thought of doing that?
So when he had his accident, it was 2007, and Facebook was just really starting here in Australia, and it started the year before, I think, but in Australia, we were just getting onto it. And so that was perfect. So I started my first group way back then, so 16 years ago, the spinal cord injury group for quadriplegics specifically, and for their families and carers and all that kind of stuff. And now it's got thousands of members from all over the world. We have a couple of admins, not just me. So one in the UK and one in the States, because of course things are happening at different times and we've got to keep it a safe space and everything. So that's probably where my best support has come from, because where we live, there were 4 of us quadriplegic wives in my region, and we would meet up once every couple of months. But the stats are something like 97% of all relationships break up after a spinal cord injury. So I am the last remaining wife. So I am the support group of one. Yeah.
That is funny, but it's also shocking, right? And that's actually a question I asked myself while listening to would my wife stay with me. And to be frank, I don't think I would let her stay with me. Like I don't know, maybe that's a default in me, but I consider myself to be the provider, and I think I would become a provider, right? But you would have to give me time. You'd have to give me like a year or two, or until I can get settled and all of that, until I can become a provider again, possibly pay someone. But yeah, like why do you think 97% leave? It's just too much work.
I think because it's hard, because not necessarily, yes, the work, but not really for me so much now because he's got carers and everything, paid carers. But for me, it's that the dynamics of our relationship changes.
Yeah.
And the relationship that we had is completely different to the relationship that we have now. But I truly, truly believe that two things. The first one is we had a child together. She was 4.
Yeah.
So it was very, very important to me that he was still the best dad he could possibly be.
Yeah.
And so he would drive her to school every day, meaning when she was little, she would sit on his lap. Then she got a bit bigger, so she would sit on his foot plates and lean against his leg. Then when she got even bigger, she would stand and walk beside him. And then he would pick her up after school each day, and he would take the girls with him as well. They'd go home, get changed for ballet, and then he'd take them down to ballet. So he was super, super, super involved as long as it was in our village space that he could basically, they'd walk and he would roll. So that was really good, is that he was, he's a dad. And so therefore step up and be the best version of yourself. And he is such an awesome dad. Yeah. So that's one thing I think that it was very important to me to keep our family unit together. The next thing is I fell in love with the person, not the way he looked. And the same for him with me. It wasn't because back then he was 20 when we got together, 17 he was when I met him. I'm 3 years older than him. And so who we were then is very different anyway, whether it had an accident or not. So I think it's about loving that human for who they are, allowing each other to grow in the different ways that we do and go on the journeys and the paths that we go on. But really at the end of the day, we started off as friends before we ever even got together romantically. And we will stay friends always. So, and I love him completely and utterly. So I couldn't imagine not being there with him.
I'm so inspired. Probably the folks that will listen to that too, but inspiration. My very rational brain tells me that both of you are special, 2 entrepreneurs. So yeah, you were a good fit, match in heaven, sort of. Then I do think, I mean, I'm bullish pretty much on everything, but I do think we're gonna be able to fix that, in less than 15 years with like 90% certainty. And if there's not someone doing it, I'm certainly gonna make it my mission. Thing that with AI and everything that we're seeing right now, things are moving really quick. Today I talked with a guy that develops drugs at scale with AI, and there's a bunch of biotech companies doing that, and I don't see why we wouldn't have scientific advances with in silico tests, so which is like reproducing a human body but in the cloud, and then making tests on it and experimenting what potentially works and what doesn't. So yeah, I would keep faith on that level. Have you seen some advancement scientifically speaking?
Yeah, I've been watching for 16 years, and I must say I've just got more and more disappointed and despondent. I feel like if it was something sexy or something really attractive or that more people were affected by, it would be moving forward a whole lot quicker.
Right.
And there's some incredible research being done. But the price is such a barrier. We're talking in the millions and millions to get involved with anything.
Yeah.
The status thing for me is that it's probably too late for him now. Okay. Because he's done 16 years of sitting. So he's gone from being a very fit 31-year-old guy to now being 47. Those bones are now, imagine standing up as a 6'3" guy and your weight being on those bones.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have a stand-up wheelchair, which would have been a great thing. So there's all kinds of things that could have been done over the past 16 years that would put his body in a better position if something were to come along where he could walk again. So realistically, as I don't want it to sound negative, because I would wish and dream that one day he would walk in some capacity. But the reality is those bones will not actually be able to cope.
Yeah. I mean, we can reconstruct that, and biochemically everything is possible. But yeah, I get you on the fact. I mean, for example, cancer, right? Or Alzheimer, it affects a bunch of people. And where are we today? It's kind of slow. But my suspicion is that AI will change all of that. We can do this. We can do this at scale. We can qualitatively and quantitatively, and that's a complex word. And not a lot of people are realizing that. But yeah, this year it's definitely the AI age has started, and a lot of folks like me were quite optimistic on all of that. And listening to you, it's also one reason why I want to spend most of my time in biotechs and MedTech type of startups, just to see the impact it can have on people's life, and it's really touching to listen to that stories. Talking about you again, what are your top 3 goals for this year?
I've had a really challenging year with staff this year. I had a whole bunch leave in one go. There
Yeah.
was, and
AI
I
again, AI.
no, no, it actually wasn't. And I'm really trying to teach people how to embrace it and how to use it as a tool for ideas, not to necessarily replace you, for example.
Not me.
Yeah,
Me, it's like straight up, I fired 80% of them and I'm using AI to replace them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so interesting. So for me, that's probably the biggest challenge, is finding ways to be less in person. And because, so to try and grow some other parts of my offerings that don't involve me, but they can involve my team more. But I never started out in business to be a people manager. I really think that's one of the hardest parts in business, unless it's your passion. But it's not. I just want to be friends with them. So it can be really, really challenging. So that's probably the toughest part. So for me, it'll be overcoming those little challenges and then trying eventually to launch another online program.
Love it.
That doesn't involve me in person.
Yeah, good idea. Where can people find out more about you, Kylie?
Jump onto our website is hellomedia.team, and it's got all the links, all the places, and all the ways to connect with me.
And I'm Charles Cormier, host, founder. Wisdompodcast.com is where you can find us.